On today's show, I will make my way too early predictions on what the Mets bullpen is going to look like come opening day.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. On the show today, we're going to be talking about the Mets bullpen. I'm going to go through all the different candidates who could make this team and eventually give you my prediction on what that final bullpen will be. In the first segment, we're going to go through the locks, who will definitely be in the bullpen, and also just go through all the other names on the 40-man roster. In the second segment, I want to focus in on 4 young pitchers who could potentially make the team out of camp, 3 of which are on the 40. Then in the final segment, we're going to go through the non-roster invites. I'm going to spotlight the few guys that I really like, and I will then eventually get to that final prediction. Before we get to any of that, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the #1 daily podcast on the New York Mets. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Now, there are 4 names that we don't need to spend much time on who will be in the bullpen on opening day, barring health. Devin Williams will be the closer. Luke Weaver will be the primary setup man. Brooks Raley will also pitch a lot of leverage innings out of the pen. Probably your 7th inning guy, but your left-handed setup man. Luis Garcia, hard-throwing sinker ball. They got a guaranteed MLB deal. So those 4 guys we know. The other guy I think we know is Tobias Myers. Tobias Myers was in the Freddie Peralta trade. He was the piece that got the deal done when the Brewers were willing to give up a second arm with 5 years of control. The Mets signed off on the trade. They were then willing to give up Jet Williams in that deal. Myers last year out of the bullpen was outstanding. He had a 1.91 ERA and 28 in the third innings pitched. As a starter, he had a 5.64 ERA. Now, this does not mean that Tobias Myers can't be a big league starter. In 2024, pitching almost exclusively as a starter, he had a flat 3 ERA, and we all saw probably the best performance of his career so far, where he really dominated the Mets in that wild card round in his start in Game 3. So I don't want to just completely write off this guy as a starting pitcher, but based on where the Mets are at, it just makes all the sense in the world that he's going to be a swingman for this team. I think this is the role that Brandon Sproat was about to fill anyway, to be completely honest. So I think Myers will be there. It's just a matter of if it's in the rotation or out of the bullpen. I think if it's out of the rotation, it's because 2 of the Mets' 6 starting pitchers got hurt, and Myers is one of one guy in a 5-man rotation. If only one pitcher gets hurt, and let's say it's not Kodai Senga, I think Tobias Myers still pitches out of the bullpen, but we see spot starts in front of Senga whenever they need him to, and then we see him going back and forth between roles. So again, I think Myers will be there. It's just a matter of what the role actually is. Funny note on Kodai Senga, they asked him what his goal is in spring training. He said not to get hurt. And Carlos Mendoza echoed a similar sentiment. It's pretty obvious. The Mets just think this guy to be healthy, and he still could be a very effective starting pitcher. Now, the next guy on the 40-man roster that I think has a great chance to make the team is Huascar Brazoban. He had a 3.57 ERA in 63 innings last year. I think is very underappreciated. That was despite the fact that he was off the roster from July 29th pretty much through September 12th. He had 2 appearances across August and the first half of September, and that's just because when the Mets picked up all those guys at the deadline, Brazoban having an option, he was the one that was sent down. But you look at what he did early that season, he brought a 1.34 ERA into the month of June, and he was averaging 15 innings a month out of the bullpen, which is a lot. Was probably overworked. That's why he had a brutal month of June. 13.5 ERA. Saw his ERA in the season nearly triple, but he settled back in July before he was sent down after all those deadline acquisitions. So I still think Brazoban is one of the better pitchers that's going to be in this competition. And while he has an option making him a little bit less of a lock to be on the roster, I still think he ends up there. So my assumption, we see Brazoban and Myers in that bullpen. Then we get 2 other names on the 40. Austin Warren had a really good year last year in the big leagues. He's actually been great the last 2 years in the big leagues. A 1.69 ERA in 2024, but only 10 2 third innings pitched. And then last year had a 0.96 ERA for the Mets But again, small sample size, 9 1/3 innings pitched. In AAA, ERA was basically 4.97 and 50 2/3. 2024, his ERA in AAA is 4.70. So whatever that is that has him being so effective in the big leagues and struggling in AAA, who knows? But I think he's in a very similar spot as last year. He's on that taxi squad up and down all season. We'll see some of Austin Warren, but I don't know if we'll see much more than we did last season. Same thing goes with Justin Hagenman. Sinker baller, 4-pitch guy, sweeper, cutter, fastball, sinker. 4.56 ERA as a swingman last year. I think he fills the exact same role. Still can be optioned up and down. Joey Gerber, another guy with an option, traded for back in November for cash, sent some cash to the Rays to pick him up. 28-year-old righty, racked up plenty of strikeouts without many walks in the minor leagues. So that part's good, but the ERA was over 6. In the big leagues last year, 2.08 ERA, but that was 4 1/3 innings pitched. Fastball slider guy, but doesn't throw that hard. I am not really that intrigued by Joey Gerber, but again, another guy that can be up and down throughout the season. Brian Hudson, we've talked about recently. The Mets picked him up a couple days ago in a trade, but it was just a trade for cash, a guy that was DFA'd from the White Sox. 6'8" lefty, had a good year in 2024 where he pitched a lot of innings for the Brewers. Bad year in 2025. I don't know. We'll see. I'm not that intrigued by Hudson either. There's nothing that really jumps out when it comes to his stuff. But when we're talking about stuff, there are 3 young relievers that do jump out that are on the Mets 40-man roster that were all added at various points last season. You have Dylan Ross, carries 2 days of service time from that final series of the season in Miami. You have Jonathan Pintaro, who I believe was the first one that got the call, going straight from AA to the big leagues after a good run there. And then after a disastrous debut, he really struggled in AAA. Hadn't pitched in AAA before he pitched in the big leagues. Went from the big leagues back down to AAA, didn't have a lot of success. And then we have Alex Carrillo, who had a ton of success early in the season, gets called up, very similar to Pintaro, has a rough stretch in the big leagues, and then it took him a while to find it. So I want to talk about those 3 arms in particular in the next segment because they're all in the 40. They now all have their options to go up and down, so we'll see them in various spurts throughout the upcoming season. But which of those guys has the best chance to break camp, and which of those guys has the best chance to have staying power in the big leagues this year? We're going to go through that here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out the forms, you can just meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online, and they're going to handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms, and they will work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives you real peace of mind knowing that an expert is handling it. And for a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointments today. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 16,000 subscribers by opening day. I really do appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. All right, so let's start off talking about Alex Carrillo, who has a 3-pitch mix. Fastball sits 98, slider in the high 80s, split in the low 90s, which is really his bread and butter pitch, has a great splitter. He throws from an interesting arm angle that is really tough to pick up. It's somewhere between 3/4 and sidearm, and it's kind of a violent delivery in some ways. It's just he just kind of fires it in there. And you look at what he did last season. He gave up 6 earned runs in his first 3 appearances in AA, but then he settled in. In May, he pitched to a 2.45 ERA, only walked 2, struck out 12, and that was in 7 1/3 innings pitched. In June, he gives up 1 more run across 7 more innings in AA, struck out 12, walked 1, gets the call to Syracuse. Across his first 4 appearances there, he did not give up a hit or a walk, and he struck out 10, gets the call up to the show, gets rocked, and he lost it. In August, he walked 18, struck out 8. So really fell apart. But in September, he walked 4, struck out 13, gave up just 1 run in AAA. So this is a guy that at one point last year showcased the ability to actually use that great stuff that he has in the zone to plenty of success. And then he came up, got, his licks in the big leagues real quick and just sort of lost that mental edge maybe. And he had to go through those struggles. I'm very curious what he looks like in camp and if he can start to sustain that ability to throw strikes. With all these guys we're going to talk about in this segment, it just comes down to, can you throw the ball in the zone? And that's really where you're at with a lot of relievers. These guys largely start off as starting pitchers, and they either don't have a deep enough arsenal or they don't throw enough strikes, and then the stuff's going to play more out of the bullpen, so they convert them, and then you're really trying to just, let it rip every single time, and that makes it even harder to harness the command at times. So we'll see if he can figure it out this year, but I think of these 3 guys, for some reason, he's the one that jumps out to me as the one that has the best chance to break camp. And the reason why I say that is because Dylan Ross, who I think is the best of these 3 arms, the command was definitely a concern. I mean, the results in AAA were outstanding. He had a 1.69 ERA in 32 innings, but he walked 17% of the batters that he faced, struck out 30.7% of the batters that he faced, which was a good strikeout rate, but he was striking out well over 40% of the batters that he faced between high A and double A at the start of the season. So you're looking at a guy, again, throws really hard, has a good splitter and a slider, so similar repertoire to what Carrillo has. But honestly, it comes down to who's going to throw strikes. And there was more evidence or more of a track record last season of Carrillo throwing strikes than Ross throwing strikes. So that's why I lean that way. But I think, honestly, both of these guys are a little bit of long shots to break camp, just because you have so many arms competing for jobs, and you're going to hand an opening day spot to Craig Kimbrel over one of these young guys, just because I'd imagine there is different opt-outs in Kimbrel's contract where he can try to get an MLB offer somewhere else. And so if Kimbrel throws good, I think he has a better chance than any of these guys to make the team. We'll talk about him and others in the next segment. The last of the guys on the 40-man roster to discuss here is Jonathan Pintaro. Now, Pintaro was great in Double-A last year. 3.40 ERA, struck out a third of the batters that he faced across 11 starts. Comes up to the big leagues, was awful, goes down to Triple-A, and continued to really struggle. So, and also the command just fell apart. I mean, his walk rate doubled in Triple-A compared to where it was at in Double-A. So we'll see what the Mets do with Pintaro. I think they stretch him out again, and they maybe keep him in a long man role, so he's kind of your next in line behind Tobias Myers for that particular role. I don't know. You also have Hagenman that could be ahead of him as well, but I think he probably fits in that bucket. But this is also a guy where you can see this stuff playing up even more if he's just short spurts, no more starts. And I don't think he's got a deep enough arsenal to be a big league starting pitcher anyway. So I think the Mets are wise to start to look at him as, all right, can we get this guy to be like Huascar Braziman was at times? Can you get 6 really good outs from this guy, and you can alternate guys like Pintaro, like Braziman, like Myers, out of your bullpen? I think that's a really effective way to go about it, and I think he can fill that role. I just don't expect it to be on opening day. The last guy I wanted to mention in this segment is a guy that's not on the 40-man roster yet, but he certainly could be by the end of this year, and that is Ryan Lambert. Lambert hasn't pitched above Double-A yet, so I don't think he makes this team, but he's got an electric fastball. And again, it comes down to command, particularly of his slider. Can he land that pitch for a strike? If he can do that with the fastball that he has, he doesn't need anything else, and he could be the next closer the Mets develop. That is how good this stuff is. So Ryan Lambert is a very intriguing project for the New York Mets, a guy that they drafted, I believe, in 2024. Last year was his first full season, and he put up great numbers. So it's just a matter of, all right, what does it look like in AAA? Can he just harness that command of the slider and just get that locked in? Because if he does, he's got a ridiculous fastball that is going to play in the big leagues. He just can't have guys sitting on just the fastball. So that's the last piece of development there for Lambert. but he's the one in this system right now that you just get really excited about. And that's why he got a non-roster invite. So we'll see what he looks like if he gets a couple appearances in the Grapefruit League. I don't think he'll have a real extended look to make this team. My guess is once we get to the first roster cuts, I wouldn't be surprised if he was among them, but still a really fun name in camp. Final segment, we're going to go through the non-roster invites, and then I will make my final prediction on who will make this team come opening day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now it's time to take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everyday Club, and you're going to get Locked On Mets without the interruptions. You'll get access to our Discord. You'll also get access to a merch shop. So if you want to be part of the Everyday Club, you can find a link in the episode description, or you go to lockedonmets.supercast.com. All right, so let's go through a long list of non-roster invites. I'm just going to rattle off some names of guys that I don't think are going to make the team. Robert Stock, 36 years old, technically listed on FanGraphs as a starting pitcher, been a Journey League minor leaguer. You never know, but he's also, I believe, pitching. Is it for Team Israel? I can't recall for sure. He's in the World Baseball Classic, so a non-roster invite that's pitching in the WBC. I just don't think he's going to make enough of an impression to make the Mets team out of camp. Brandon Waddell was very effective last year in a swingman role, 3.45 ERA and 31 and a third innings pitched. Gave you a nice left-handed option, but he's now out of options. So the Mets cannot call him up and down from Syracuse. And when you get to some of these names that I don't know if they're necessarily going to have a bunch of big league opportunities and they don't have the ability to go up and down, you're kind of in a tough spot to make a roster. So I don't think Waddell makes the team because of that. I think he ends up right back in Syracuse. I think the no options also hurts guys like Carl Edwards Jr., who has plenty of big league success, a 3.56 career ERA in the big leagues, but he hasn't pitched in the big leagues since 2023. You have Nick Birdie, who had a really good season in AAA last year, 2.83 ERA, really good strikeout rates, palatable walk rates, but they have killed him throughout his career, the walks. He's 33 years old, sinker ball with a good slider, but again, no ability to be options, so I don't think he makes the team. Joe Jocks is a sinker slider guy from the left side. He had an ERA over 6 last year in AAA, though, so I'm not going to really expect him to make the team. One guy that's interesting who had great numbers last year is Kevin Herget. Now, he was one of the guys up and down at the Mets, had a 2.77 ERA in the big leagues. Not a lot of strikeouts, but the strikeouts were there in AAA, and he had a 2.81 ERA there. And the thing that I like about Kevin Herget, he throws strikes. So that is one thing to like, but the fact that he now can't be optioned, that hurts him a lot as far as making the team at any point, honestly. Mike Baumann is coming back from the NPB, where he pitched to a 4.20 ERA, but he also walks 16% of the batters that he faced. I'm not going to pretend like I know much more about Baumann or if I think he's even going to make the team. So that's your list of non-roster guys who do not have options. There's a couple more in Adbert, Azolay, and Craig Kimbrel, but I want to discuss those guys last because I think they have the best chance to make the team. When it comes to minor league guys that would have options, if you added them to the 40-man roster, you have Anderson Severino, who has not pitched professionally since 2022. He's been in the Mexican League the last couple of years, and last year he had a 2.68 ERA with 46 strikeouts and 37 innings pitched. And I'll tell you what, the Mexican League, it's like playing at Coors or in Arizona at all times. There's a lot of elevation in the ballparks there, and the numbers that people put up in the Mexican League are insane offensively. It's tough to pitch in that league. Yes, the competition isn't as good, but the environment is terrible for pitchers. So that's pretty impressive stuff. We'll see if he actually makes the team. I think he's a left-hander, but I got to see what it looks like against big league competition. I can't pretend like I know that the Mexican League is going to translate. So, but definitely an interesting name. Matt Turner got an invite, hasn't pitched in the big leagues yet, was in the Guardian system for a long time, just spent last year at the Rockies, but didn't put up good numbers. Daniel Duarte was good for the Reds in 2023, had a 3.69 ERA in 31 appearances, made 2 appearances with the Twins in 2024 that needed TJ. So he's still got to work his way back. I think it's probably likely that he's not going to be with the big league club come opening day, but we'll see. The last one is Nate Lavender, all the options are still there for Lavender. So if the Mets added him to the 40, they could call him up and down this year, and they could do that again in the next 2 years. In 2023, he pitched to a 3.27 ERA in Syracuse for the Mets, struck out 35.1% of the batters that he faced. Had a great camp in 2024 in spring training. We all loved him, and then he got hurt, and he needed Tommy John surgery. And last year, he was with the Rays as a Rule 5 draft pickup that was just a draft and stash. They drafted him, they stashed him on their MLB IL, and they had the ability to keep him. And because of a 40-man roster crunch after the season, they passed him right back to the Mets. So now they have the opportunity with Nate Lavender, who then I guess did not get selected in the Rule 5 draft. I'm sure he probably was still eligible again. They have a chance here to actually get this left-hander who was great in their system up to the big leagues. And I'm really curious if he can break camp. He's been very good in the spring training in the past. So I do like Nate Lavender a lot. I think he might be my favorite of some of these kind of under-the-radar lefties that are in camp. Adbert Azolay is a guy we've heard about for 2 years now. The Mets signed him to a 2-year minor league deal. I shouldn't say 2 years now. We heard about him from early in camp last year till now. As the Mets signed him to rehab, he had Tommy John surgery, so he was just basically around the facility all year last year, waiting for the opportunity to eventually get back in the Grapefruit League and win a job this spring training. So we'll see what it looks like. His last full season, he had a 2.67 ERA out of the Cubs bullpen and saved 22 games. Pitched some in 2024, did not have as much success, but I don't know how much the injury impacted that. And then he went down and again missed all of last season. So he is definitely one of the more prominent non-roster invites to keep an eye on. And then the most prominent is Craig Kimbrel. Kimbrel signed a split contract with the Mets, so he gets $1.5 million if he's in the big leagues, with $500,000 available to him in the incentives. He's in the minor leagues. Obviously, there's a different salary there. We know who Craig Kimbrel is. Longtime Brave. We all hated him for a long time as well. But there's a ton of experience to fall back on. This guy, probably a Hall of Famer. I mean, if not, he's going to stay on the ballot for a long time, and there'll be plenty of debate about his Hall of Fame credentials once he gets there. Fastball knuckle curve guy forever. Okay, 14 years, where it was pretty much a two-pitch mix, and he was sitting 96 and 98 with that fastball across all of that time. In 2024, the velo dropped off the 94, as we talked a little bit on yesterday's stream, and the results really struggled. He went from a 2.80 ERA prior to the All-Star break to a 10.59 ERA after it, pitching for the Orioles, and eventually I believe he got cut. Last year, had some success, but pitched more in the minor leagues than the big leagues. And part of that, though, was just rounding out more of an arsenal, working on a sweeper, working on a changeup. Carlos Mendoza, highlighted that changeup in yesterday's yesterday's post-workout presser. So interesting to think about what a changeup can do for him, as I talked about on that show. My assumption was that he had struggled against left-handed batters in 2024, and I was a little bit right there. The numbers, the splits aren't that alarming with the FIP. Certainly does paint that picture. FIP is fielding independent pitching, so isolates just the pitch performance, removes the defensive components. He had a 5.30 FIP against lefties, a 3.0 FIP against righties. So that is a drastic difference. And like I mentioned on that stream yesterday, the changeup would definitely help neutralize lefties a little bit for him. And clearly this is a guy that still wants to pitch and has proven that he still can pitch, as he was very effective last season in AAA and in his few spurts in the big league. So I think when it comes to my bullpen prediction, it's hard for me to not predict Craig Kimbrel making this team, just because he has the longest track record. I think he is going to be given every opportunity to grab a spot. And I think he brings a lot to the team with his experience. For a bullpen that might be a little bit inexperienced beyond him and the few high leverage guys they have. Eventually get AJ Minter back, and that'll be a huge lift. But you're looking at veterans in that pen. It's those four locks. Other than that, you're wondering if it's going to be young guys, if it's going to be non-roster invites. I just think a guy like Kimbrel would be a nice steadying presence. So my prediction is Craig Kimbrel is part of that unit. He is one of the guys that will break camp in this bullpen. Here is my 8-man unit for the pen. My prediction, the first one here, is one of the Mets 6 starters goes down in spring training, just because it's starting pitching and it's spring training and these things happen. The Mets make it through with all 6 guys. That's amazing. You then have one last spot in the bullpen, but I think it's going to be 5 starters, Tobias Myers in that swingman role where he can hop in, make those spot starts in front of Kodai Senga when they need it, but also go right back and be a long man out of the bullpen. And then your bullpen specifically will be Devin Williams, Luke Weaver, Brooks Raley, Luis Garcia, Craig Kimbrel, Huascar Brazaban, Tobias Myers. And I needed one more name, and I was back and forth. Thought about Adbert Azolay. I thought maybe he would be the guy, and he certainly could be. I was looking at the 40 and saying, all right, maybe it's one of the young guys. Maybe it's Dylan Ross. Maybe it's Alex Carrillo. Maybe it is Jonathan Pintaro. Maybe Austin Warren, after a great season last year in limited work, finds his way onto the team. Maybe it is Hageman. Maybe it's Gerber, or maybe it's Hudson, the 6'8" lefty that doesn't have any options. So there was a lot of different candidates, and I doubt that my prediction is going to be correct, because predicting what the bullpen is going to be on February 12th is a fool's errand, because you just don't know who's going to get hurt. You don't know how many spots are available, and you don't know who's going to perform well. But from the last bullpen spot on today's prediction, I threw Nate Lavender in there. So that is my 8-man bullpen. Devin Williams, Luke Weaver, Brooks Raley, Luis Garcia, Craig Kimbrel, Huascar Brazaban, Tobias Myers, and Nate Lavender. I'm curious what your bullpens would look like if you guys are making predictions. So I do encourage you to throw some of those in the comments. Let me know what you think your 8-man unit would be, what you want to see. I can't wait to just have these conversations over the next, 5-6 weeks here, where we start to see some of the Grapefruit League results. And also once we start to see some of the first and second waves of cuts, then we get down to a point once you've gone through 2 cuts and you start with 70 guys in camp, and now you're down to the high 40s, maybe even lower than that. And you just start removing all these other candidates and clearing the field, where you'll get to a point at the end of spring where it's 5 or 6 guys competing for 2 or 3 spots. And that's where spring training can be fun and exciting. I do think it's interesting how the Mets have only locked in 4 guys, and they mentioned that they didn't have enough optionality in their bullpen last year. So you do wonder, would they lock in a Kimbrel and an Azolay and have 2 guys that can't be optioned? And then you have 6 guys in your pen that can't be optioned, with Tobias Myers and then 1 more flexible piece. You could do that, but that's why I ended up just going with either Kimbrel or Azolay, and I picked Kimbrel. It could be both. Those are the 2 guys with, I think, the best track record of this long group. The track record of pitching and leverage to great success in the big leagues. But there's a lot of competition, and that's what makes spring training fun, is seeing if these guys can separate themselves. So we'll see exactly how it all shakes out, but that will be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. Should have said it on the front end, but apologize for getting the show up a little bit later today. I was pretty exhausted after yesterday, and as I was diving into the profile of the 30 arms that I was going to discuss on the show today, I might have exaggerated that, but I don't know if I did. It's over 20 for sure. I got a little bit tired, so I decided to sleep for a little bit and record this in the early morning, so I should hopefully have this up by 8 o'clock. And I appreciate all of you who tune in after the fact. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. Make sure you're checking us out across all social media platforms. We're growing on that front, posting more on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. So make sure you check all of that stuff out. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network.